Welcome to Beneath the Headlines. My name is Mike Woodruff, and each month I have the opportunity to talk to thought and opinion leaders, to authors and others about the ideas that are shaping our world. Beneath the Headlines is a production of the Lakelight Institute. Today, you're going to listen into my conversation with Andy Crouch. Andy is a public theologian. Andy is an author of some very important books. Andy is on staff with Praxis, which is a very interesting sort of VC-adjacent effort to promote, both in the for-profit and the not-for-profit space, what they call redemptive enterprises. And Andy's just an interesting person. He's the one, so Andy was a college pastor at Harvard with InterVarsity for a number of years. We particularly intersected when I had started something called the Ivy Jungle Network. Andy this was 30 years ago. Andy was a young guy, but he was just such a good, careful thinker. That although he was young and a little young and odd, I was always trying to sign Andy up to take on topics. He worked as the editor at Regeneration Quarterly for a while. He was then hired away to become an executive editor and leader at Christianity Today. He did that for a number of years, which is how we got him, because Harold Smith, the acting president of Lakelight, was his mentor. Harold was the president at Christianity Today at the time. Andy briefly went to the Templeton Foundation before going to Praxis full-time. He has written prominent books on culture, called Culture Making. He's written on power. He's written a lot on technology. We had him in and had him speak 3 times. He spoke to pastors. He spoke then in the evening to 600 people. We had to close the event because more people signed up than we could handle. He spoke on technology and how we live a tech-wise life. And those, Andy doesn't allow his public events to be recorded, so we do not have those, but he did agree to answer many of the same things that he was talking about to the pastors and then to the general public. He did answer a lot of those same questions in this podcast with me. Andy's a fascinating guy. Again, I've tried to get him for 10 years to do different things. He's much in demand. We're glad to get him. This conversation sort of ranges on a number of topics, but anytime you can read Andy Crouch or listen to Andy Crouch, I think it's worth it. So here's our conversation. Andy, so good to be with you after all these years.
It is great to be back together. I like it.
I feel the need to, I've had this weight I've carried since we were rooming together at an Ivy Jungle conference about 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Because I hung up on your wife. The middle of the night, the phone rang. I thought it was my wake-up call. I just picked up the phone and put it right back down in the cradle. And then it rang again, and I picked it up to say, I got it. And it's your wife. And she's like, I need to talk to Andy. And I'm
Goodness.
So I always feel like, yeah.
Wow. Well, 32 years later, Mike, it's okay.
Okay, I'm glad to hear
You're
that.
forgiven.
Yes,
You're forgiven.
Well. So, tell us about Praxis. Let's start there. I've got all kinds of questions for you, but let's talk about Praxis.
Well, Praxis has been the great adventure of my life in some ways. Joining myself 8 years ago, an organization that's 15 years old, that started with a very simple mission in a way, which was to support Christian entrepreneurs, founders of ventures. Both for-profit and not-for-profit from the beginning. We don't care that much about your tax status. What we care about is that you have a redemptive intent for what you're building in the world and you are trying something new, ideally with a vision of repairing or restoring something that's missing in the world or broken in the world. So by now we've worked with 250 folks intensively. That would be people who had actually started something new, came to us for mentorship and community and spiritual formation, and also kind of technical help with whatever they're wrestling with as you try to build these things. And
there's a team. So you have
now
how
there's
many staff? I
well,
saw your website.
When
It
I
looked like a
joined,
lot.
it was 8. Now it's 32 or so. So we've grown a lot in the last few years, partly because we've grown internationally. So we now are running accelerator programs on the African continent and in Asia Pacific, as well as in the United States. We also work with networks of entrepreneurs around the world that we don't run. We just support them. Because it turns out the question our founders were asked 15 years ago was, are there even enough Christians doing interesting things in the world to justify a program? It turns out there's an amazing number of people, and we have the privilege of kind of connecting them to each other and encouraging them in what they're doing.
So somebody applies for this. You have these are going ventures, and they apply and they say, we're going to sit under your direction, guidance, encouragement program.
Yeah. So when they apply, the two things we're looking for that we select very intensively for are high ambition and high humility, which we do not think are opposites. We think those are different axes, and we've made one or two mistakes maybe over the years, but generally you don't get in the door unless we see that you have a really high level of focused kind of ambition for your own personal effect on the world and what you're trying to build, and you have a very deep sense of your need for God, your need for other people, just of who you are, and that you are no more than who you are, which is what humility is in a way. So we're looking for that. And in some ways, you could say what we're trying to do in the year that they spend most intensively with us, they're kind of part of our community for as long as they want. But
and they live there.
No, it's a 3 weeks over the course of a year. You're together with 12 other ventures and founders. So you are living. We ask them to pretty much leave their work behind, be deeply together. We take them to places where it's hard to get anywhere else, and do kind of a retreat for a week, 3 times essentially. And in those times, really what we are trying to do is actually increase your ambition. You might say increase your realistic ambition. That is, help you actually have a bigger, more focused vision for the thing you're building than you might currently have, and actually increase your humility. That is, deepen your sense of dependence on God, your need for God, the ways you access God in the midst. Maybe some people will be able to imagine, I think a lot of people can imagine, how much pressure founders are under of any new thing. You're the only one who cares about it. Your family thinks you're slightly crazy. Your investors, if you have them, or your lead givers, if you're a nonprofit, I mean, they're cheering for you, but they don't stay up at night wondering about how it's going. They got irons in many fires.
Right.
But this is your thing, and you have to do everything. And how do you also become a person of prayer, a person of patience, a person of kindness? I mean, all the fruits of the Spirit, basically.
Right.
So that's the work, is helping people with that.
I have been wrestling with the topic of ambition again recently. Like, what is, so ambition is, I mean, it can be good or bad.
Yeah.
So what does godly ambition look like?
Yes.
And how do you keep that in, how do you keep that between the ditches? Because it can be hard. And I will say, when I was a consultant for 8 years, self-employed, doing the Ivy Jungle and some other things, I came to the conviction that entrepreneurial panic was driving America. Because you do wake up and you're like, it's
what made this country great.
Well, I have to make this work, or it doesn't, and nobody cares. And then when you start to hire staff and you're looking at their family going, okay, now I got to get this done. It's because my own family, but this has to happen for their family. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, God bless you for that. I think that's a great. I think that is great, and I read your. I mean, as I've sort of thought I knew what it was, and I put it in a separate category, sort of like when International Justice Mission came out, and you listen to them talk, and you go, oh, this is like, I mean, there's relief work, and there's evangelistic work, and there's church planning work. This is this whole new space. And I sort of did the same thing when I heard about this, redemptive effort. I'm like, Okay. So I get it. But that little booklet that you guys have put out, that was very helpful. So, okay. Well, as so disclosure here, you're in town for a pastor's event. We got you for a day. You're doing something later tonight. You've just done a pastor's event for us. And when I was recruiting for you, and I did say, as I shared with you, good news. You had the second highest close rate of anything I've recruited for in my 26 years here. But you were behind Bubba and the Holy Smokers barbecue class. So
I'm so sorry.
Well-
Or maybe I'm just thrilled, actually.
Yeah.
I love the idea that there is a guy named Bubba and that he runs the Holy Smokers. That's
right.
awesome.
Well,
That's
Bubba
awesome.
actually was my parents' pastor, and he had this whole thing called Bubba-Q. And
Of course.
he had these big smokers, and for years I heard him talk about it, and I just sort of was like, yeah, that's just an Arkansas thing. And then I heard he's like, I recruit people when there's a crisis, when there's a challenge, or people are working, teachers in inner city schools or something that nobody's recognizing, and somebody says to me, somebody ought to help those people. I say, okay, well, be at my house at 4 a.m. and bring $1,000, and we're gonna go cook barbecue for them. And then he said, they serve, and you got 8 hours of smoking where you're sitting around. It's discipleship time. And I thought, there's some genius here.
Absolutely.
So
this deserves to be the number one.
yeah,
thing.
well, he
We
came
need
up.
a national movement.
He came up, and I had him train a bunch of guys, men and women, in how to
Mm.
cook barbecue. So, but you finished behind that. But lots of people interested in what you think, in part because you write and think across a variety of interesting topics. And I was not happy to see a podcast by you on alien life and whatever
You were not happy?
yesterday, because I'm like, well, now I have to listen to that and figure out what he's going to say there, because this is just dropped and people are going to want to know, what does Andy Crouch think about alien life? And that was a little bit far afield of what I was thinking you were talking about. But you said you thought there's a 40% chance of alien life.
Yes, I
and-
think that was my number. Yeah.
But I thought I appreciated how you thought theologically, and mining the book of Job and what it means to be made in the image of God and the incarnation and what does it cover. It was good, interesting.
Well, I said at the beginning of that particular interview, like most people know, if you like do a PhD at least, if you really seek to know something, you learn everything about something. But to be a theologian or to be to think biblically is to know something about everything. So we should be able to take any topic and connect it back to kind of the key things we believe. And I do find that a fun challenge with everything except politics, which is the one thing that I am congenitally not that interested in. But everything else that human beings get up to, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So yeah, alien life and what we think about it was fun to talk about.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to start. Broad, and we'll sort of dial this down. I have been thinking there's a crazy amount of crazy out there, and the velocity of life and the number of significant topics or movements that are changing at a significant rate is sort of goes beyond my ability to stay engaged. And I do feel, as a pastor, I'm not. I wouldn't describe myself as a theologian in the way that I've heard you as a public theologian. I mean, everybody's a theologian. We all have thoughts about God.
Mm-hmm.
The question is not whether we have thoughts about God. The question is whether our thoughts about God are any good. But I do feel some need to know something about a lot of things that are shaping the lives of the people, the church that I am trying to lead. So, which of these many things that are screaming for our attention are you thinking the most about, or do you want to comment on? So, the wars, Ukraine and Iran, AI, debt, the depopulation issue, polarization, radical Islam, statism, or the state of Western Civ. Just a few. A few of the things that I sleep fine
Okay.
at night, but a few of the things that if I was going to stay awake
A
at
few
night,
worse,
they would be
right,
on
sir.
that list. Yeah.
Oh man. The one I'm most actively spending a lot of time thinking about and trying to learn about is AI, because I think it's a big deal for our world, and it also really intersects with the things I care most about, which is kind of where our technological imagination came from and where it's taking us and where we could take it. That is, what is the dream behind these things we're building, and what do we hope for?
Is it the Tower of Babel, or is it right to go to the Pope's
Yeah, the Pope
encyclical?
said, yeah.
Yes, or is it Nehemiah rebuilding the?
Well, it is clearly currently not a collective project to repair the things that are most broken in our world through patient, assembly of a wall around a fallen city. It is absolutely the Tower of Babel, like for the most part. But another way to put it is it, to what extent does it anticipate the city that is to come? The New Jerusalem, and so AI is certainly the one. I mean, by far, that I'm actively thinking about, trying to be careful about, trying to not react too quickly to all the things you have to do to think carefully about something.
Well, I know that's your sandbox, and I got some questions I want to drill down on that in a minute. But let's hover above the list, and so wars, debt, depopulation, polarization, radical Islam, statism, and Western Civ. Pick one.
Well, can I say I don't deny these are very important topics. I'm not sure they matter the most. I think when I hear that list, first of all, I get somewhat anxious, and I definitely don't feel imaginative. That is, I don't feel like something's coming alive in me that wants to see a possibility. I feel protective. I feel defensive. I feel like we need strategies for this stuff. I just wonder if the most important things, which may be much harder to list, that we ought to actually be paying attention to, would have a much more imagination awakening kind of feeling. So I'm thinking a lot about what my friends who are musicians are doing with music. Like we're down to basically 4 chords in Western popular music.
Hey,
like
everybody in ministry needs to know how to play. Yeah, D, C,
1, 4, 5, and 6 minor.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're losing. I want to tell you, 6 minors in jeopardy because we're almost doing just 1, 4 most of the time these days. But so I'm thinking of my friends who work in the popular genre, those genres, the vernacular music of our world, right? That is very simple. And yet I have a couple of friends. I mean, I'm thinking about my friend, John Guerra, who's this incredible musician, songwriter, and his wife, Valerie, and they were just with us at a Praxis thing, which is partly why I have them in mind. I listen to what John does with very simple elements, and yet he's doing things I don't think we've ever heard musicians do. And so and he's awakening things in his relatively small audience. He's not like a pop superstar or anything. He's not a worship megastar, but I would want people to be mostly attuning themselves to the things in our world that don't make us mostly just feel scared. Now, that being said, there are scary things happening. And if you are like in the bullseye of it, it's all you think about, understandably. If you're on the front line of Ukraine, your daily life is where are the drones coming next and how do we get through today? But for those of us who aren't necessarily in the bullseye, I just think we have a responsibility to not dwell too much on any of that. I will tell you on your list, there's absolutely one, in addition to AI, that I think is the biggest deal. It is also the thing that we will only be able to imagine our way out of. And you used the word depopulation, which I take it to mean you're thinking about declining birth rates around the world.
Demographic trends.
Because for now, the world is getting more populous. Human population is increasing, but it is on...
Because everybody's living twice as long.
Longevity, and there are parts of the world where there's still a very large young population. They're having kids to some extent. But what is happening is birth rates are falling below replacement everywhere that has gotten rich and Western-ish, which is most of the world now. Or as people attain the dream the Western world has built itself on attaining, and that you and I are fully paid up members of that world, they lose to some extent the desire, to some extent the ability, and to some mysterious extent the social circumstances in which children are brought into the world. And this means that at extreme cases like South Korea, which is at a 0.7, if I'm not misremembering this, replacement rate, that is the average number of children a woman has is 0.7. Since it takes, generally speaking, a man and a woman to have a child, that means you are like less than half of the number of children you need just to keep the population what it has been. Like in 100 years, there is no nation of South Korea as we know it. Now that's extreme, but the rest of the world is all on that track. And this is the one thing that they say in the social sciences, demography is destiny. Like these demographic trends are so long wave, they're so big, they're so inexorable, and they take decades to play out, right? That there is nothing you can do. And I don't know, I'm not sure what it will mean for the world to have 2 billion fewer people in it in 2100 than it has today. I don't know that it's all bad things. But what I do know is it's like the greatest summons to creativity that humanity has ever faced. Like to have an imagination that says it's worth bringing children into the world and here's how we're going to do it. I just think it's the most beautiful, challenging, creative question we have.
I know that you and your wife recently became grandparents. Sherry and I have 2.5 grandchildren at the moment. And yes, it is. I sort of just marveled when our first granddaughter was born. I heard that there's 3 things adults can stare at: water, fire, and babies.
Oh gosh, yes.
And you just are like, yeah, I'm just staring. I don't feel the need to do anything other than marvel.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
pure contemplation.
Yeah, it's
only one of the 3 stares back.
Right.
Because the thing about babies is they don't interrupt their gaze. Like, I mean, they'll eventually they'll find something more interesting. But you and I, when we make eye contact, we look away. It's what we learn to do. But babies haven't learned it, so they just gaze at you like as long as you want. Oh, it's amazing.
It is. It is amazing. So,
but I mean, think about this. Like, it is the most truly the most wonderful thing is grandparenthood because so few responsibilities, so much upside, right? And it is the biblical definition of blessing. Right? May you live to see your children's children. You know? But what kind of world have we built that is so comfortable in so many ways? So seems like a great time to be alive, like measured in many senses, except that we just don't get around or have the social circumstances that make possible having the most amazing experience in life, which is seeing a new life come into the world and be somehow connected to that, related to that. And where you have millions of people who would like to have that, but the social circumstances make it impossible for them even to have one child. So it's just a wild, to me, it's like a linchpin. I don't know how to put it. It's a window into the deepest question I have about what we're all doing, which is, are we really getting what we think we're getting out of this modern project? Right. Like, is it going the way we want it to go?
But it does feel like at this most basic level, so I would agree. There's many things that are going well, and I feel when I'm speaking or writing, I always want to say there are things going wrong. There are many things going well.
Like works better than ever.
Right.
Yeah.
I love being alive now. My dentist uses Novocaine, right? I mean, it's like
dentistry is, right.
There's, and we're living so much longer, and there's so many blessings that we have. There are challenges, but I do find myself saying, how is it that Western Civ is collapsing in on itself? It's failing a most basic test of having more children, and I go, I don't. That makes me nervous, and
I would say there's something about what we're exporting that even countries that don't become fully Western, I wouldn't say South Korea is Western per se, but that adopt kind of a core package of things, they then go through the same, at least demographic collapse.
Right.
A little bit different social and political dynamics, but yeah. What's going on? I mean, I can tell you if you want to know. It's
Sure. Do tell.
You worship false gods, and they deliver for a while, and then they stop, and then they start. They undermine everything good, and the final thing that every idol asks its worshipers to sacrifice is children. So when the idol has completely stopped working, it makes the ultimate demand. So all idols start out seeming to deliver a lot and demanding very little, like just a pinch of incense or just, then they gradually demand more and more, deliver less and less until they deliver nothing and demand everything.
Yep.
And the final thing the idol can ask, I always, like when I'm doing this to live audiences, I'm like, what's the greatest thing an idol can ask you to sacrifice? And everyone says, your life, which is wrong.
Right.
Your child's life.
Right.
Your child's life is more precious to you than your life. And that's,
Right.
so the ancient world even the Roman Empire, the nations that Israel occupied practiced the literal sacrifice of children, some of them to the god Moloch, this ancient god. Rome, and if children were born who in any way could not kind of meet the standards of Roman society, you'd have a slave take that little baby to the trash dump and leave the child there. And like every society that has worshipped false gods has ended up with this failure to thrive, basically. And the Western world, though built on an inheritance of Christian faith, because Western really means what was once Christendom. First of all, like many people, including Israel, never fully stopped worshiping false gods. Never dealt with the injustices that the worship of false gods leads to in its own history, and now is reaping the results. So it's an old story. I mean, it's happened many, many times in history. It's just now happening to maybe a cultural project we are implicated in a way we don't feel about ancient Rome or the Babylonian gods or the ancient Near Eastern gods. I will say the other thing is, in the midst of that story is a redemptive story of a people who live differently. And that story does not, it has ups and downs and waxes and wanes in certain cultural conditions, but overall just keeps growing through history. And the church is more diverse and beautiful and alive and vibrant than it's ever been in all of history right now, even though not so much in the West, but globally, like amazing things are happening. And in the West, amazing things are happening.
I heard 10 years ago or so, I was at an conference, and there was a political scientist speaking, and he had done his dissertation on societies that collapse. So he had studied 37 civilizations that had collapsed.
Yeah.
And he said there's two things that you see in every society that is imploding. And he said it is sexual immorality and debt.
Whoa.
And
well, fortunately, neither of those are bomb bros, so we're good.
So I raised my hand
gosh.
and said, okay, well, I feel the need to ask, like, how long do we have? And he said two things that have stayed with me. And I called him back and talked with him. Because I said, this is, you have gotten you grabbed my attention there. One is that he said, look, when these cultures go, they go quickly. He says the second thing you have to understand, though, is when a culture collapses, it's not that the people die. What a culture collapsing is a complete breakdown in trust.
Wow. Yes.
And he said so you go back to only trusting a few people.
Right. That's right.
And I mean, you just flew in, right? All the people you trust.
That I had to trust to come
to
here.
get here.
That's right. Yeah.
And if that stops working,
Yep.
then everything comes down, it shrinks. And
Right.
he said, what people will do, and he said, I'm going to say to you, it was a group of pastors. He was not a pastor. I think he was Catholic, but he was not there as a Catholic. He was there as a political scientist. And he said, what I'll say to you, though, is when societies collapse, people wake up and they look around and they say, that family down the street, They love each other. Like we got to be like that.
Yes.
And he said, so don't give up, doing what you know to do, and care for each other and create these pockets of health and trust and love and grace. Those will be the islands that will,
Yes.
they will rebound.
This is the thesis of two books that I think were so encouraging to me and so bracing and challenging. Rodney Stark's book, The Rise of Christianity. He's a sociologist.
Yep, the sociologist.
Looking very much at this question: how is it that Christianity for 300 years grew at, I believe it's 30% per decade,
a rapid pace? Yes,
boom, boom, boom. As the empire around it is going through a lot of convulsions and ultimately collapse, and then a more recent book that kind of picks up where Stark leaves off by Alan Kreider, late historian, called The Patient Ferment of the Early Church. The Patient Ferment of the Early Church. And Kreider really takes Stark's challenge, which is how do we account for this kind of amazing growth under so much pressure? And he says it was the quality of the relationships that the Christians demonstrated, which in the ancient world came under the heading of patience. Patience being a kind of constellation of virtues that allow you to put up with violence without becoming violent yourself, to treat others with forbearance rather than, really it all comes down to rejecting violence, because we cannot conceive of how violent the Roman world was. And this was when it was functioning well, not when it was breaking down. But the Roman hierarchies were sustained by violence from every superior toward every inferior. Husbands toward wives, masters toward slaves, freeborn toward, foreigners. Right. And the Christians just trained themselves to not use or respond to violence. And this is, I thought of it especially because of your illustration, like that family down the street. Well, in Roman cities were packed together. They were very dense, and they don't have window panes the way we do. So there's not great sound insulation between dwellings. Now, the rich have villas and they live kind of in big villas, but most people live in these really kind of apartment building-ish places. And you will hear domestic violence every night from your neighbors. You hear people screaming as they're beaten by their superior, or being violated sexually because that was another way that it was kept. It didn't matter whether it was male or female. It was just how you made it work. And you'll hear these noises, and then there's this one dwelling where you hear the husband and the wife speaking with love toward each other. And you hear the master speaking peaceably to someone who may still be legally his slave. And you're like, how do I get to be part of that?
Of that, yep.
And Kreider demonstrates like the intentionality with which the first Christians, he looks at the first couple hundred years, taught their people to live differently in this relational way that your neighbors couldn't help but see that you were different. So I am, I'm an heir of Western civilization, and there's so much beautiful in it that I don't want to be lost. But in the end of the day, I'm a citizen of another kingdom, and my hope is so unshaken in this other kingdom that is growing in the world, even as empires rise and fall, including maybe my own people's empire, you might say. Well,
I was, so we're in a series here at the church, we're in a series on forgiveness. And so this is a Monday. Over the weekend, I was looking at some Proverbs about patience and about forgiving, and I was sort of looking at forgiving the annoyances and the minor things and the minor problems. And I said, look, I'm not here to tell you. I mean, this was just the reflection of the week, which was challenging. I'm not here to tell you that you've got to forgive these things. The goal is to become the kind of person who naturally forgives these things. That's what we want, right? So it is iterative. You're going to have to make some decisions that you're not going to, seek to punch back. And I said, but we don't just need people who are going to forgive. We actually need people who are going to take anger out of the system, who are going to take some cheap shots and say, I've given cheap shots to Jesus. I can take a few cheap shots and take some of this anger out of the system. So, I mean, it's Proverbs, it's James 1, it's other things. So
I can only think about my very mixed experiments in driving peaceably on the highway. Like, just not retaliating.
I just asked him not to retaliate in the church parking lot after the sermon, after the service. Like, please.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing the level of like spiritual concentration it takes for me to, as people are clearly getting aggravated over very minor things, not to become one of them. Wow. Yeah. Yes, it's good.
Okay, so I want to stay high level for a little bit longer
good.
before we dive into some AI and tech stuff. So,
Okay.
yeah, it seems to me like Francis Fukuyama was wrong and Samuel Huntington was right. So we have the end of history did not happen, and we are in a clash of civilizations. Do you think that's true, that Huntington was right and Fukuyama was wrong? And how does this get any of your, does the rise or the threat, I'm meeting later this week with Ibu Patel. I don't know if you know Ibu. I have serious questions. I just want to ask Ibu, who's a Muslim, like, okay, how are you thinking about this? Where are we headed? How do we So do you, anyway, Fukuyama, Huntington, anything there?
Okay, so, well, full disclosure, those are important books in geopolitical theory, you might say. Political theory in the case of Fukuyama, and more geopolitics for Huntington. And I have read neither one because, as I said earlier, this is the one area that I truly am not that interested in. Of course, Tolstoy, I think, said, "You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you."
Yeah.
So politics is interested in me. I know that, and I can't not pay attention to it. I'm aware that it's going on. I think I know something of the arguments of each of those books. But I will say, I try not to be preoccupied with it. For one thing, I think I tend to think in 100 years that the cross currents that we don't currently observe within these things that we think are clashing are going to be more important than the things themselves. So what I would mean by that is, Western society, as traditionally understood, is exhausting itself, is unable to reproduce itself. So the two most fruitful groups in America are the Amish and Orthodox Jews, who are having no trouble having babies, even though they have the same they live in the same world and year of our Lord that we do, and yet here they are. So you play that out 100 years from now, and there are cross currents. I mean, for example, in the secularism of the West, we might tend to think, for example, that the secular West, particularly maybe represented by Europe, is in a contest with the traditional religious new arrivals from the Muslim world in particular who have emigrated to Europe. And so, Europe over here is secular. Well, but then you start talking to secular European elites and see how many of them are suddenly going to church, talking about going to church. You have very well-known secular people in the United States going on stage with Christian interlocutors, like happened at Stanford a few weeks ago with the podcaster Andrew Huberman, who starts talking he ostensibly is there to represent a non-theistic point of view, and starts talking about how before the event he was praying to Jesus in the bathroom about how vulnerable he should be, and he asks Arthur Brooks, who's his Christian interlocutor, how he prays. So, we can't assume that we've got these two monolithic civilizations.
Right.
They each have cross currents in them that from another 100 years we will see. I mean, in some ways, as we could have seen nationalism 30 years ago, but we would have been like, that's kind of a fading thing. Well, it's not fading for the moment. The same thing will keep happening. And then within, say, the burgeoning populations of the world that are looking for opportunity, that see in the currently wealthy nations like Europe and the United States, a place where they and their children might do better than they do at home. And so one way or another, they're showing up on our shores. I mean, they themselves come with a mixture of perspectives, motives. I mean, Ibu Patel is going to have a very different angle on what it is to be American and Muslim, along with someone like Shadi Hamid, compared to some people who may take a very antagonistic posture toward
Hirsi Ali.
right, who
Has come to faith.
Having grown up in a very fundamentalist Muslim environment and fled to the West where she could be a happy, fulfilled atheist, discovered being an atheist was terrible, and is now posting on Christmas Day how she has found a love in the Christian faith that she never imagined finding.
Like, and her husband, Neil Ferguson, coming to faith, getting baptized. I know.
So don't follow trends. Like trees don't grow to the sky. The biggest things that will happen in history, no one will foresee, neither Fukuyama nor Huntington. I don't know how people think Huntington's thesis is played out. I don't think it's played out as simply as he laid it out. So I don't spend much time trying to play that grand global game, because I think the most interesting things that are happening, probably none of us can fully see. And then I just look at what's happening around me and I'm like, yeah, but it's way more interesting and hopeful than I see in these kind of big, economist think pieces. So why pay that much attention to the economist think pieces? I read those things. But I just don't dwell. Right. I don't dwell on.
I'm going to a study in 2 nights on the economist think piece. Yeah. So you're really demotivating me here from reading that piece. I have not read it yet, but. Well, say something about being hopeful, because you're around young entrepreneurs who are doing redemptive work, and frame that, because
sure.
Let me frame that. When I read your book, I said, okay, there's exploitative enterprises. They're just trying to take money and less than ethical. Mm-hmm. There's ethical businesses trying to do the right thing and be honest, and then there's these redemptive. At cost to myself, I am going to do good for the common good or for some other people.
Yep.
So you're working with people who want to be redemptive.
Right. Yeah, we sort of talk about chasing the redemptive edge. It's not really some place you can say we've totally arrived, but it's something beyond just being a good person or doing well by doing good. Which
absorbing some of the pain in society.
Yes, that's right. So yes, that gives me quite a bit of hope. You used a modifier that I would think might be worth noting. Young, you said young entrepreneurs, not unduly young. So there is this Silicon Valley thing happening of highly technically skilled young people with kind of unusual mathematics and computer science technical ability who go to Silicon Valley and start a company at 19 and they've got a $300 billion valuation when they're 25. That does happen. And we have a couple of people like that connected to the Praxis community even. But most entrepreneurs, this is speaking very generally, not just Praxis, it's actually surprising how far along in life they are. They usually have had quite a bit of experience, but the only difference between them and other people who had that experience, Csikszentmihalyi says, the only difference between like true innovators and everyone else is the unwillingness to take for granted what everyone else accepts. So they have this restlessness that follows them often through a fairly long career. So I would say our median fellow is probably 40 to 45, maybe 40. We have younger, for sure. We have some who are older. What they all have in common is an unwillingness to take for granted and to pursue. I think Mihai says to kind of pursue the things everyone else is pursuing. They just decide, I'm going to chase something different. It is a very hopeful group of people to be with. Partly because the things they're doing are very beautiful, and partly because they are so dependent on God that they're just healthier people than the average person. Like they're more aware of their need for God than most people. And that's a good group of people to be with.
Okay, well, I like the way you have reframed some things around the stepping away from the dark, looking for opportunity to serve, to love, trusting God. Okay, yes, we've got these problems, and these are real problems, but I'm not going to ignore them, but I am going to invest my time and energy and talents and things that
because
serve.
They're not going to be solved in the terms that they're set anyway. If that could be done, smart people would have done it. They're going to be served by the creative, unpredictable work of God in human history. I mean, the things that have really moved the needle in the beneficial direction in human history
have been surprises.
Are sovereign acts of God, beautiful surprises. Now, there have been terrible surprises also, but if you ask it's like the world has an inexorable momentum. That's some of the demography stuff. It has bad things that people do that derail a lot of good things. But then where does good come from? It comes from people a random Oxford-trained Anglican clergyman who doesn't have a very healthy relationship with women and gets tied up in knots about his own spirituality and goes to Georgia, and it gets even worse. And then he meets these Moravians, and his name is John Wesley.
Right.
And like a whole beautiful things happen
Right.
out of this. And his brother, this little family become like consequential in the religious history of a century and more. Like you can't, if you're reading the Economist think piece in 1750, you just don't see that coming yet. Here it comes. I mean, but at that time, Britain is unbelievably secular. You don't see the Victorians coming. You don't see, I was just in London, all these monuments built by people who built them to the glory of God in the Victorian age. Now they had their blind sides for sure. But there was this amazing moral and spiritual renewal of a nation. This happens over and over.
It is easier to project bad than it is to predict.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to do extrapolation, it's going to look pretty bad.
Yep.
But if you believe God's on the move, Aslan's on the move, then a lot is possible.
Okay, so let's pivot to tech. This is your sandbox. You're famously involved in this, have written about this. So I guess let me ask a couple intro questions to sort of step us into a conversation about AI.
Sure.
So true or false? AI is going to take 3 times as long and be 10 times as hard for companies to pivot to than they think.
Oh, probably true. Yes.
Well, tell me. So tell me, you think, I've heard you talk about, is AI electricity or is it nuclear energy or is it something else? And by the way, I've had people ask, is AI the serpent in the garden? So time-wise, what?
Pick my metaphor.
Pick your metaphor.
Pick my metaphor fighter. Well, the question I've had in mind is it the internet, which was a pretty big deal, but a lot of things that we could look at 1990 and today are not that different. Electricity, which if we look at 1900 versus today, we're like, ooh, it's pretty different. Or agriculture, which was a couple 1,000-year development in human history that everything changed, right? So which one is AI? My current bet is on electricity. I think at least I think we should be prepared kind of
so in 100 years, things will be profoundly different.
I think that is very plausible. I don't know that I'd say it's like definitely going to be the case for many reasons. I will say I see a lot of technology with the caveat that technology has all kinds of beneficial uses. Nonetheless, the way technology actually gets deployed in our world is in service of the false God that Jesus called Mammon. And boy, Mammon has placed its bets on AI. And what Mammon wants in a capitalist economy, Mammon tends to get. And just to put it very concretely, like people with decision-making power have placed trillions of dollars on a bet that we're going to build this thing. They are not going to be easily dissuaded from getting their money back. We're going to ram this thing through one way or another. So in that sense, I mean, I actually have not done the numbers for like, how does that compare in a way with electrification of our society? Like, what were the economic stakes of that? I'm not sure how you'd compare, but I just think economic interests are very, very powerful in saying we are going to get this thing that we want, which is basically to remove humans from economic activity so that capital gets 100% of the profit rather than 50%. Currently, share of labor and capital is about 50-50. We're going to radically balance that toward capital. And we're going to make everything far more efficient. And I just think what Mammon wants in the medium term, Mammon gets until it destroys your empire. I think it's electricity level social transformation, most likely with some big footnotes. Yeah.
I've been hearing people celebrate that AI, what AI is going to do, and the robotics that are going to follow, and our ability to not work. And I have said, I'm a pastor. When especially men lose their job, this is not a good thing. Like they don't I see pictures where everybody's, on a picnic and they're having a great, wonderful time. And I guess they're reading Shakespeare and they're being culturally, my experience is they drink too much, they get mad, and bad things happen.
Wow.
So work is very important. Work is a get to.
Integral.
Work is a get to. It's
yes.
not a have to. Yes, it is affected by the fall. There weeds grow in every garden.
Right.
But
there's fruitful labor to be done in the world, and we are very, very frustrated when we have nothing to contribute like that. Yes.
I do think, a lot of the tech people I listen to, and I've tried to listen to some of the tech podcasts just so that I at least have some working knowledge of what other people are talking about. And I always end up, yelling at the going, you have such a thin view of humanity.
Oh, totally. Yes, that's right. And of work. I mean, so AI has been most disruptive in one of the most tedious human activities that still requires you to be really smart, which is computer programming. So computer programming is basically turning complex human realities into something a computer can understand. It is very hard to do for multiple layers. It's tedious. Programmers are really smart, so they get bored easily. And in the end, what are you doing? You're sitting in front of a screen for the last 30 plus years. The way you do this. Now, recently, it's actually become a little more social. There was this thing called pair programming where you're actually doing it together. But generally speaking, you are isolated. You're interfacing with a machine language, basically. And it's not, it's a very highly paid job, so we think it's high status. But actually, typical software development is not a very fun job and not a very multifaceted kind of human activity. It turns out AI is really good at it. Yep. And the software people are thrilled because they would much rather not have to do this tedious stuff. And the whole reason they went into programming was to automate tedious stuff. But when you generalize from that to all the things human beings do, prepare food for other people, provide meaningful healthcare to other people, teach other people the inheritance of your culture or a new language or how to understand that painting in the museum. Like, the thing is, the programmers are all like, oh, we can automate that too. It's all just data language models. Like, here we go. And everyone's like, well, wait, I actually find meaning in this.
Yes.
It's like, well, it's because the software engineers ultimately have had a very constrained vocation that you would be desperate to get out of if you were really smart. You'd be like, let me out of this little box. And AI gets them out of the box. But most people don't have or need jobs like that.
I don't know if you heard, there was a podcast, the All In podcast, and they were talking
the apex podcast of this world.
Right.
This world.
And they were talking about the lawsuit between, Musk was suing,
OpenAI.
Was suing OpenAI. And then it turns out that this lieutenant to Sam has this journal.
Yes, he kept a journal of his. Yes,
which I
would never, if I had those motives and inner thoughts, I would never write them down. It's just amazing that people write these things down.
Well, I was shocked that he wrote them down and that he didn't figure out a way to get rid of them and that they were discovered and all this. But there was a moment where they were talking about this and they asked each other. They said, "Do you?" And these guys are brilliant, and I find it fascinating to listen to. But they said, "Do you keep a journal?" And they're like, losers keep a journal. You don't look back. You don't reflect. You don't meditate. Yes. Go forward. And I was just like, wow.
Mark Andreessen, the famous venture capitalist, posted recently on social media, almost in these very words, said introspection is for losers. Like, who would ever be introspective? Like, what a waste of your time. I mean, don't you have better things to do?
Right.
It's a very attenuated view of humanity. You're right. By the way, just as case number one now and forever, OpenAI, founded as a non-profit.
Right.
This is the whole grounds of Musk's lawsuit, whatever the legal merits of his case, the underlying complaint is founded not for profit to guard this amazing technology for the benefit of humanity. Somehow, magically gets turned into a massive for-profit enterprise while the attorneys general of California and Delaware just sort of wave it through. Mammon gets what Mammon wants. Like, that to me, it is the most incredible example in my lifetime of Mammon being like, you know what? I am not content to not own that thing. And so I'm going to get it. No matter what the laws say, what the charter says. It's an amazing story of the power of the principality we all live under.
Okay, well, so tonight you're going to talk about you're sort of revisiting the TechWise life and TechWise family and reflect on this. And I saw your notes. You shared them. I didn't see them.
Did you read my journal?
Yeah, I didn't get into your journal. I saw your notes, and I see that you're going to say that you were not quite concerned enough or prophetic enough, or that you were a little bit more. Your solutions were a little bit more passive than you now think they need to be.
Yeah.
You're going to be a little bit more Amish, as my kids accuse
even
me.
more Amish.
Are we Amish? I go, we're not Amish, but
Almost.
but there's a lot of things about the Amish that are worth celebrating. But
yeah.
So, what are you going to say? What do you say to people who are maybe a little bit too cavalier in understanding how the iPhone or screens or whatever you want to say are going to malform their soul?
Yeah. I now believe even more strongly than when I was writing that book 10 years ago that our prime directive as human beings, the thing we are made to do, that when we do it, we are just most alive, has been systematically undermined by 100 years of technology. So I do not think it's just about the smartphone or the personal device at all. Because what I think we are called to do, get to do, part of which is actually good work, is love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus uses those 4 terms, and I actually think they're very illuminating. So heart is your capacity for emotional range. You can live all-heartedly or you can live half-heartedly. Soul, I think, is depth of self that can connect to the depth that is in others and the depth that is God. Mind is our capacity to reason. Strength is our actual physical constitution. And I think we have lived through a 100-year atrophy in these capacities brought on by technology in the following order. First, we took out strength because machines did the work that our bodies used to do, a lot of our bodies. Now, are machines way better at doing it? Absolutely. Is it good for the world that in some ways we've handed over some kinds of physical work to machines? Yes, it is. But the cost has been that now we all, if we are paying attention, we probably should be going to the gym more than we are. And even those of us who go to the gym, I mean, I'm very serious about working out and strength, endurance, and flexibility. And I take 2 medications for the defining disease of our time, which is metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, heart disease, high weight, and high blood sugar. Even though I'm very, very committed to like a healthy bodily life, I still end up needing like drugs to maintain these things. Then we replace the mind. So strength goes, then mind goes, that's computers. And can computers do certain calculations faster than us? Yes, they can. And is that a good thing? Sure. Except that it means we start to just outsource all of the capacity for memorization that the typical person used to have. Anyway, I could go on. Then we outsource the heart through entertainment. So the rise of mediated entertainment, where celebrities who are more interesting and attractive and compelling than any of the people you actually know are, attract more and more of your emotional energy. Now it's faces on TikTok who say and do more compelling and interesting and scandalous and attractive and arousing things than any person near you will ever do. It's totally diverted the heart and it compresses the range of the heart. So we've taken out strength, we've taken out mind, we've taken out heart. What's left? I think AI, in its ability to be a mirror to us, Aaron, our tech was, and we were talking about this before we started, and he said the way he thinks about AI is a mirror. I was like, exactly. That's the thing it most is a mirror. And it is just reflecting you back to you all the time, but it does not reflect back the depths of you. It reflects back a very compressed, narrow, shallow version of you and produces a narrow, shallow version of you. And I just think we've got to reckon with how much has been lost already in multiple generations and commit ourselves to a different way that says, I'm going to regain my emotional range. I'm going to regain my ability to think. I'm going to regain my depth of soul. And I'm going to actually live a life that is good for my body and gives me something to love the world with in my own strength. Does that make sense? And I mean,
tragically, yes.
That's sort of in TechWise Family. But when I wrote it, I was like, oh, I don't want to be too hard on people. It's very hard to make these decisions. And now I'm like, come on, guys. Like, let's do something different here.
Yep.
Like, well, there's a better project than the one we've been handed.
I've shared in sermons with the congregation in which I've said, some of you, you wake up and you look at your cell phone like it's one of the first things you do. I said, I just can't imagine. Like, I have to, I fail at this. I don't want to suggest otherwise, but I have to see the world through the lens of the gospel. I can't tack the gospel onto the lens of the world.
Having already kind of absorbed. Right. Yes.
I've got to do this in order or I am undone.
Yeah.
And
sequence your day to start with the realist thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And it does feel like I lack the moral muscle I need for the pace of the current that keeps coming.
Oh, gosh.
Every new technology, every new thing is another thing I have to sort of steel myself against. And
this is why my preferred metaphor for it is a tsunami. Yeah. Like, it's a cultural tsunami. If the tide is rising, or, people talk about culture, it's like the river a fish swims in, if you swim against the current. It's like if a tsunami arrives in your oceanside village, like you can't swim fast enough. You can't outswim it.
Right.
Like, the only hope is that one of your ancestors, and this is literally true in Japan, put a marker up like 200 years ago at the spot that is safe from tsunamis. And you know where that marker is.
And you run to that.
And you go there.
Yep.
Like, that is what it's doing to our lives as families, our lives, our most human lives, which is our most relational lives, our families, our schools, our churches. And you're not going to be able to outswim it. But that being said, I think we can absolutely collectively make different choices and live a different way, just above the waterline.
Yep. There are yes. Well, I have kept you longer than you agreed to be kept. So let me end with the 4 rapid fire short questions here. The standard questions. What, if anything, is keeping you up at night?
A mysterious medical condition. I've been sleeping very badly for 3 weeks, and I am desperate to find out why, because I don't feel anxious about anything. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just not asleep. So I don't know what it is. But if you know a sleep doctor who would like to consult.
One of my neighbors. One of my neighbors is a sleep doctor.
Right,
so
I may be consulting one soon.
Yeah. Well,
other than that, nothing really. Yeah.
Most people, just as an aside, most people say my kids.
Oh, of course.
Whatever we've been talking about, they're like, my kids. And this is true whether their kids are 6 months old or 50 years old.
That's right. Totally.
What is on your nightstand? What are you reading at the moment?
3 books. Malcolm Geit's Galahad and the Grail, which is a long ballad poem about exactly what it says on the title. Sarah Hinlicky Wilson is a Lutheran pastor who has an amazing book called 40 Facets of the Ascension. And Jason, I'm forgetting his name right now. There's a book called Paul and the Resurrection of Israel that is a thick, long, in-depth technical book, but nonetheless really interesting by an author whose name I haven't quite retained, obviously.
What have you been recommending most often in the last couple of years? What book, podcast, Netflix series, Amazon product, restaurant, anything, music, you're just like, oh, you've got to do X or listen to Y or...
Well, I don't think I do much of that, but, the music of John Guerra, I would highly recommend. I have been sharing that with all my friends. And to the right people, there is this British psychiatrist / neuroscience guy named Ian McGilchrist who writes
massively big books.
Way too long books. And they are so interesting if you are the kind of person who likes that kind of thing. And so to my friends who I think would be interested, I will say Ian McGilchrist has been like genuinely, I'm like, oh, have you seen this latest
1700
page book? Yes. Yeah.
Last question. What are you working on next?
The question of whether there is a prophetic word for the church on AI. And that is an open question, at least as far as I'm concerned. Like, do I have, or do people I know, or does the community I'm part of have a prophetic word? And that is the question we are trying to answer without knowing right now what the answer is.
And I think I picked up that you do not think that the Pope's latest encyclical went far enough.
Sure, that's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Andy, great to be with you. So fun. We could talk for another 3 hours. And
no one would be still here.
No one would still be here. But I have 3 hours of questions. But anyway, thanks so much for what you've done for the last 30 years since we were last rooming together at a conference. And God bless you.
Thank you, Mike.